This is the Mid-America PTTC podcast, where we believe prevention is better together, and together we are stronger. I'm your host, Steve Miller. This is episode 53, and in today's podcast, I have the pleasure of speaking with Peter Komendowski. He is one of Iowa's leading advocates for healthy drug-free communities and is a sought-after speaker as an expert in substance abuse prevention and high-risk behavior management. In 2013, he was invited by Mediacom to host the TV series Children and Drugs: Secrets for Parents, which aired 8 episodes. Building on that success, he was invited back to host the TV show Surviving Bad, now in its 6th year. He is co-founder of the internationally renowned Iowa Digital Literacy and Wellness Conference, and as a writer and a speaker, has been entertaining audiences of all ages with his observations on living in the digital world, life at the speed of human. Before we get into the content, we would like to thank our funder, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Quick note, although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. Well, welcome to the podcast, Peter Komendowski. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. As everyone will find out, you and I got a lot in common, and we're never a want for words. So welcome to the show.
No. How many hour show is this?
We can do it.
I appreciate being out here with you.
You're sure welcome. So the first question I always ask is, and I'm always intrigued by the answer, is how did you end up with a passion for prevention? How did this become where you're at this stage in your life?
Well, let me give you something that I haven't given to another interviewer just for the sake of conversation, because a lot of people are watching this Johnny Depp trial going on, and we all sort of marvel at how much of a drug abuser abuser he is, and admittedly is. And I will say that in my younger days, Johnny Depp had nothing on me. But I was also one of those lucky guys that never got addicted. I could go on a binge for a month and then not do drugs and then stop. And so that went, that phase went by. You grow up with kids and you saw a lot of people encounter bad consequences, even in times past that people thought the drugs were softer or easier. Bad things would happen. Life moved on. I ended up in Iowa. I had grown up in Chicago. And I was in the advertising business. As a consultant, I was working on a project with drug endangered children in Iowa. And that was done through the Office of Drug Control Policy, DEC, Drug Endangered Children, the Partnership for Drug-Free Iowa, and the Face It Together Coalition. They also got together to help develop a campaign to promote this new program to help children that were endangered by drug use in the home or in the community. And in the process of doing that, I got to meet some really cool people. I mean, the governor, leaders of major corporations, business and industry, faith leaders. There was this cadre of people that had all the money and success they'd ever want. And they were willing to focus on how drugs were affecting kids and on making sure that Iowa kids had the best chance to get the best education, the best quality of life, and the best hope for the future. And that really opened some eyes to me, because growing up in Chicago in the corporate world, in the advertising world, there was a higher echelon of decision makers like the governor and major CEOs of corporations that didn't mingle with people in every level of society freely, because it didn't conflict with their business, didn't conflict with their character or their moral, ethical standards. They didn't live on a high horse. And to find this group of people in Iowa that were so dedicated to young kids and safe communities and a safe world for children just blew my mind. I was thinking that the movers and shakers would be some of the most selfish, idealistic, greedy people I'd ever meet, and it was just the opposite. I found leadership really giving a darn about kids, and I was just honored to work with them. And that almost 20 years ago now, and here I am today talking about it with you.
Well, we're certainly glad that you, I guess, turned the corner and had that experience. Because I very seldom come across people that say, this is not with 100%, but there are some exceptions. But most people say, I really didn't know anything about prevention, or I wasn't looking to get into prevention. And all of a sudden, when they kind of turned that corner, all of a sudden they're here and this is their livelihood. And you have covered a lot of ground in your work with prevention. And that's kind of how you and I kind of cross paths. We have a mutual acquaintance, and it was shared with me, you need to meet this guy, Peter Komendowski. He does some of the same or similar kind of work that you do, and has a background in advertising. And those that have been following our podcast know that my interest has been in music and how music impacts choices. And then you and I connected on that. And you have your program, Surviving Bad, which I've been a guest on, and then returning the favor to have you here. But I think our commonality is this: it can be music, or it could be this digital realm, advertising. It's really about how all of that has converged, and how all of that is used to target the consumer with alcohol or other substances. And how, those of us that have been in that side of the industry, if you will, can now on this side think, I'm not trying to depict this side, that side, you know where I'm coming from, how we kind of together can take some of that history that we have and create some very unique products or services or projects that utilize advertising in the digital realm and TV and radio and all of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how Peter and I got associated with one another. And we talked for a long time before we pushed record, and probably could continue talking for a long time, because there's really a lot to this. But to talk about kind of where we're at now, you've been doing this some 20 odd years, you said. So let the audience know a little bit more about like what you're doing now, the efforts that you're leading through A Healthy Iowa, and some of the components that maybe are accessible to our audience, especially downloadable versions and things that they might use in their prevention efforts.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we have in common is my mantra when I was a teenager was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And when I became an adult, I was probably like most adults on the face of the earth, believing that these were choices I made. I could turn them on and off when I wanted to. And in fact, I was probably lucky at being a person that didn't have that gene or something that made me get addicted. So it was a very sort of a private Idaho, it was my own world. I went through it. I get what a lot of dark stories might be like. I don't need to share them. But I did grow up on that side. And then doing this project in Iowa, I recognized the fact that there's a lot of really innocent people that are affected by this. And I got to the idea that addiction is more like a disease. It's not a choice. People that get addicted aren't people that are bad people that make bad decisions. As a matter of fact, if there's a bad player in the addiction industries, it's the pusher man, it's the dealers, it's the pharmaceutical companies, it's the beer companies, it's the tobacco companies, the vaping companies. I mean, we've been blaming the wrong people. And I grew up with that, and as an adult to do a complete about face, which I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I was prone to changing direction. I was happy. I was on a course, I was living life, and maybe like most people, more concerned with me than you. But when I recognized how lucky I was to dodge the bullets I dodged, and the gravity of the problem, and then something that I had become an expert in, how media affects youth behavior, I recognized that here we were at a perfect tipping point, that all of the mental health risks, that all of the substance use disorder risks, they were going to explode logarithmically when the industry that knew how to manipulate the human mind, especially young human minds, put their energy behind promoting these actions with youth. They do it through music, they do it through videos and film, and every group that's risen up to try and protect their kids from this gets beat down by tremendously wealthy lobbying groups and industry-led organizations. I mean, I even heard that the largest opponent of being able for a parent to censure violence in viewing movies at home, so they could get a tracking thing so that violent sections would be removed and profanity be removed, things like that, not knowing it specifically, but the biggest organization fighting was Disney, and Disney is like somebody that I associated with family values. You don't really realize that they've sold me on believing that they might be just like Coca-Cola or Budweiser, they all try and give you an idea that you have great values, but they don't have great values. They're selling stuff that's hurting our kids. And so recognizing how lucky I was, and knowing that, you only get one shot at this life. Do you want to give something back, or you just want to just take? And when you have a decent life, having about everything you want or being able to do whatever you want is a pretty sad thing too. That's just like, is this why I'm on this earth? Can I look the other way to kids that are hungry, to kids that are homeless, to kids that are couch surfing in school, to kids that are basically living in a world of a tremendous amount of predators, especially now when they're engaged in social media, something that very deliberately is taking the attention away from family and faith and education and putting it into a virtual world with values that are not predicated on the well-being of the people that are participating. They're values that are based on them being able to change the behavior of young kids and people to buy their products. And the more addictive the product, the riskier the proposition.
Mm-hmm. So eloquently spoken. I like how you expressed that. So from the perspective of what you're doing in some of the digital realm now, the program you have, some of the offerings that you provide, what are some things that someone listening might look into and say, well, here's a great resource, or here's a particular program that maybe comes to mind that might introduce the listener to what you're producing today?
Yeah, a real cool place to go on our website, and you do have to register, but it doesn't cost you anything, and we don't bug you. But you register to be able to download videos, and we do that to protect the people from altering our videos and things like that. But if you go into resources for teachers or educators, if you look at it, there'll be a little menu, and you'll go to resources, and then you'll click on it, and it'll just have one blanket page. But the ones for educators have really been the ones that we've distilled from our massive portfolio of tools that really target kids, and they're also good for parents. I should do resources for parents and educators. There are great modules on social media, how it affects the brain. There are great videos to download and watch with your teenage kids, or just, as a mom or a dad, to get an understanding of the world that kids live in on social media. But I can send people there, and I think that's great if they're motivated. But sometimes, and you know this as well as I do, we spend so much time pouring water on the fire that we forget about this magical word called prevention. And what we've learned from media, it's a simple math. There's only a limited amount of time in people's lives, and parents have to work and kids have to be in school. But it used to be that kids spend about 60 hours a week under the roof of a family, or playing ball in the neighborhood, or doing stuff with other people, or going to church classes, or going to Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, any number of things. Before cell phones and social media. Now, they're more likely to spend most of their time in social media in less than 10 hours a week and face-to-face time with their family. Every single bit of research that we distill points to that being as the significant breakdown that has allowed media to take advantage of that position. And quite frankly, parents are under pressure, so if the kids play video games and the kids do this, that sort of occupies them, and you can do what you got to do as a parent. But I like to look at examples that make some other kind of sense. I think about when you have great times with the kids, like if you take your kids camping. Do you give them each a bundle of sticks and some matches to start their own fire? No, you build one fire and you sit around it. Yet in today's household, when people come home from work and school, they all go off in a different corner of the house and get on their own pad or something. There's nothing wrong with a family watching TV together, with even playing games on a computer together if they want. But that's what's missing, that together part. Mm-hmm. And that's interesting, because when you look at predation, what's its nature? If you have lions trying to eat a zebra, what do you see? The zebras get around in a big crowd, and the lions try to call the little babies and the weak ones to eat them. Well, if I'm calling media a predator, is it true that they're trying to separate children from their parents to influence their behavior so they can, quote unquote, not eat them, but eat the time between their ears, their brain, take away their thinking and their behavior? Yes, that's what they are. That's how you define a predator. And a predator is if it's empowered by, as we have a business system that gives every corporation the right of the individual. You talk about that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a lion or a tiger culling a young baby in the wilderness so it can eat. Oh, it looks sort of sad, brings tears to the eye of a child, but that's the law of nature. And so these big social media giants are using those same principles. And now all of a sudden you have to think, now why are they no better than a lion or a tiger? Are we not an apex predator on this earth for a reason, with the ability to have moral and ethical judgments? And is that an example of exercising moral or ethical judgment if you are on the board or own a company selling alcohol, tobacco products, marijuana products, fentanyl, opioid products? Man, that is not somebody that cares about kids in the future. Now, we have systems. We have the FDA. We have great systems to manage a lot of these risks. But we're living in a world where it's the wild, wild west when a kid turns on their smartphone or their computer or their iPod and listens to music. You're an expert on that. You know what the kind of music. You were telling me a statistic about, positive musical messages and negative ones. What was that percentage?
Only about 4% of the music that's broadcast contains any kind of a prevention or a healthy choice messaging in it, and 95 or 96% of it would lean towards, the choice for substance use or other risky behavior. So, well, that's interesting. So when you were talking about that and having family time together, and all of this fast-paced world that's going on that seemingly sends us to different corners of the home and watching our iPad made me glance up at the notes that I just read, and I was curious if you might flesh out a little bit. Living in the digital world, life at the speed of human. And it says that you've been entertaining audiences and of all ages with observations about that. Can you tell us a little bit about living in that digital world and that life at speed of human? Like, what is it that what would you bring to the audience when not to give away everything because we wanted to buy a ticket, but what I mean?
Let me tell you about the brain. It loves to read books. It loves to sing songs and listen to music. Loves to play music. It loves to do art, not just look at art. But something interesting happens when we look at mass media and digitalization, is that things can go by so fast that you don't even perceive how it influences you. And there's so many examples of that. I mean, people don't want to believe they can't be influenced, but let's try this on the people listening to the podcast. This will give you a perfect example of how easily the human brain can be influenced. Do not think about elephants.
Too late.
Too late. It's that easy. I'm not even a master magician, and I'm not, a big consumer products company, but I can make you all think about elephants for a second. And an hour from now, you might go, yeah, darn guy, it's like a song that gets stuck in my head. Why am I still thinking about elephants? Because that's the way the brain works. And so when you look at that, we know that, a simple thing like Facebook, who has mastered the addictive properties of media, the actual getting of a like, if you're on Facebook and you post something and somebody likes it, in your brain, you have dopamine. I'm not going to do the dopamine science thing here. I bet you do a podcast on that somewhere. But the dopamine response, in other words, the feel-good response from a like on Facebook is almost as much as doing cocaine. Mm-hmm. That's how powerful the media is. Now, here's something fascinating. We know that there's other things that give you as much dopamine response as cocaine. One of them? A hug.
Yeah.
A true hug from somebody. So remember I talk about that lion trying to cull the youth from the crowd, from its herd so it can influence them? Well, every one of these computer screens is like that lion. It takes time away from you having a hug or a smile or eye-to-eye contact with another human being. And every single stat that we have now researched for, with the increase in smartphones have proliferated in children's lives, every single metric at unhappiness and mental health discord has gotten worse from people using social media. So they convince you that heart and that like is happiness, just like cocaine convince your brain that that's happiness. And we got millions of people in America would never do cocaine because it's a dangerous drug, but they're getting the same thing from that like on Facebook every day, when they should get up, walk to their husband, their wife, their kids, their friends, give them a hug, And man, that's just as powerful as that drug and powerful as that like. And if you spend more time with people, emotional, visual hugs, life at the speed of human is connecting to real human beings. The predatory nature of media is that it disconnects you from dealing with real human beings, even to the point where kids will text each other in the same room. Or take pictures and share them in the same room. They're looking at the same thing. And I mean, this, in your heart, you have to feel that there's something wrong with this picture. And so we talk about addiction, the mechanisms of social media as it influences people to be less happy and less healthy, and potentially lead them towards higher risk behavior, because it separates that person from a caring population of parents, faith leaders, teachers. Okay, the same mechanism is the one that drugs use, the dopamine response. So we need to teach kids to be skeptical buyers. Now, the one thing I have found in talking to kids from 5th grade to 8th grade, even high school, but the younger you talk to them, the better, when they recognize that risk exists, they become skeptical consumers of media. And that's what we want.
Right.
Use your intelligence to understand. And so many of them, we got more kids reading now, more kids playing. It's like the double-sided edge of the COVID thing. Some people benefited from COVID. Introverts, they didn't have to go out anymore. You can say a third of our population is basically introverted. But a lot of kids missed being face-to-face with other kids. They got all the media, all the games, all the movies, all the Netflix they'd ever want. Parents couldn't stop. They had nothing else to do. Man, when they were able to go back to school, the younger the kids, the more they just wanted to play with other kids and have nothing to do with media.
Yeah, we want to be a part of a community or part of the tribe, or we want to be with our own kind, so to speak. And family is our own kind, but we also want to be with our own kind when it comes to being in that school setting.
So the other thing that the speed of human is life at the speed of love, man. It's life at the speed of love. And you want to love your smartphone, you want to love your computer. Hey, I'm not going to tell you that kind of kink is against the law, but what you really want to love is a human being.
Yeah.
Or beings. And you can share love. Love is indiscriminate. Love is like a tidal force. It's like an energy that anybody can tap into. It's not private. We cannot let it all get sucked down the drain of social media. It needs to be here where people walk and talk and breathe.
I like it. So would you tell me a little bit about the Digital Literacy and Wellness Conference? Is this an annual event? Is it something that our audience might be interested in tapping into when the next opportunity arises?
Well, the videos from it are on our website, so they can actually see the presentations and some of the curricula our speakers developed for schools in Iowa. They're all on the website. If anybody has problems, they can always email me, peter@ahealthyiowa.org, and I'll help them find it, because we have a lot of stuff on our website. And it's like a library. If there's a lot of books, there's just going to be a lot of places to look to find the books you need.
So you're the librarian, so to speak.
In a way. COVID stopped our big conference, and COVID even slowed down us having a quick rebound conference, because there's a Zoom blue, Zoom blues going on. People are zoomed out, man. I mean, it's like a hammer. Okay. I talk about this all the time. Hammer is a great thing for building a house, but if I hit you in the head with it, it's not such a great thing. The other thing is, would I give a hammer to a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, or an 8-year-old and hey, walk around the house, experiment with this and figure out how it works? Well, the house is going to get destroyed, but the kid's going to do nothing. It's not kid-like. It's just going to experiment with the hammer. Well, we give kids access to these computers where there's human trafficking, ultra-violence, all kinds of drugs and really bad stuff. I mean, we don't moderate it. We don't measure it. So when we look at digital literacy, part of it's teaching parents that they need to talk to kids about this. But the other part is just showing kids how dangerous it is, because they don't know, because there's really a powerful tool in prevention. And this one, it's called perception of risk. So if you don't talk to your kids about it, and if they don't teach it in school, they will not perceive a risk. If there's a dangerous snake in the wilderness and all they've told you is that it looks pretty and don't worry about it, but if it bites you, you die, and nobody tells you that, well, guess what's going to happen when you run into that snake? You're going to get bit by it, and bad things are going to happen. So we need to teach children what to be wary of and what to do. And the difference between living life at the speed of human and the speed of technology is so radical, because in the technological world, there are multiple mechanisms in a very narrow time slot. And you think about it, when you're on your phone, how many things do you see in 60 seconds? You see a tweet, you see an ad, you see a this, you see a bell, you see a like. I mean, if you start looking at all the different things, multiple mechanisms are at play in a very narrow time slot. Well, this is how you distract people from life at the speed of human. It's like a video game. So what you'll do is you pick up that phone and those multiple mechanisms are all working on you so that you never really get bored. They're flashing at you from all different angles. And they're capitalizing on fractions of a second. They're not even waiting a minute. Next thing you know, you put your phone down and you go, my God, where did that hour go? Or I've had people say, how did I just watch TikTok for 20 minutes? I was just going to look at one. You know, it's like, how do I eat just one Lay's potato chip or have one M&M? You know, so when we realize that when we let kids into the virtual world, that these multiple mechanisms are just pounding on their young developing brains and getting it to change their behavior. If the parents and the teachers aren't empowered to help teach them these risks, we have to go directly to the kids. Well, educators are in a perfect place to start, parents are in a perfect place to continue, and kids are a great audience because they don't like to be doped, they don't like to be fooled, and they don't like to be manipulated. So if you give them a perception of risk, they'll work right with you to make this world a healthier and better place from a prevention point of view.
Absolutely. I love that you depicted it, that age range, those fifth, sixth, seventh graders. They're always the funnest audiences to be in front of because they take what you're telling them serious. You know, they really just want to know. And it's not just because, you know, you're this cool guy that came to speak at their class. I mean, they want to know that from their parents. They want to know that you're familiar with the developmental assets. The children want to know that they can trust the adults that are in their lives. They want to know that what they're telling them is, you know, so to speak, the gospel. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should be, you know, in the business of nurturing and guiding not just our own children, but all children. We should give them be on the lookout for their safety and well-being.
Yeah, when you think about it, there is no creature on the face of the earth, no mammalian creature, that keeps their youth in the nest as long as a human.
Mm-hmm.
16, 18, 20 years. I hear some parents are encroaching into the 20s and 30s with their kids at home. I mean, there's a reason for that. It's a reason we've been able to do the things we do and accomplish it. But now if we look at the last 20 years since the advent of computers and the last 12 years since the advent of smartphones, the amount of time spent parenting while they're in the nest is gone down tremendously, precipitously. So we have this wonderful advantage. It's been built into our culture to raise our kids, but we're letting computers raise them for most of their waking hours. It's not their parents raising them anymore or their teachers. And that's a breakdown. That's a breakdown that, especially with the help of kids, because they don't like it either. Kids want their parents to love them, to spend time with them, to keep them fishing and camping and doing stuff. Given a choice versus that and video games, you know, a ton of unbelievable. You know, we used to have trouble. I don't know about you, but I used to have trouble getting high school kids to understand addiction because it would always be in the context of an uncle or a parent or somebody that couldn't control, you know, they had trouble with alcohol or drugs. But once they started playing video games, and, you know, you talk to them about the fact that, okay, what does an addict do before they go to sleep? They have a cigarette, they have a beer, they have a drink. What is the first thing an addict does when they wake up? They have a cigarette, they have a beer, they have a drink. Okay, so what's the last thing you do before you go to bed? Get on my computer, play computer. What's the first thing you do when you get up in the morning? Get on a computer, look at. Oh, wow, man, you have a lot in common with addicts. That's how we define addiction. It's a behavioral problem. Now, the next question is, when you turned it off, was it too late? Should you have been sleeping? Should you have been doing something important at the speed of being human to your friends, your family, your classmates, getting rest because you're a football player and you don't want to be tired on the field? Was there something that doing that video gaming displaced? And all of a sudden, yeah, that's what happens to addicts. The addiction becomes stronger than the important things in their life. It takes over. So now for the first time, I mean, we can condemn media all we want, but we now have one of the best tools to teach addiction science to kids in high school than we ever had. They used to be able to go, I'm not going to get addicted. This isn't, why are they talking to me? I'm not one of those guys that are laying in a ditch with a needle in their arm. Yes, you might be. and when you teach them that, they now understand something really important to be risk averse about. If it has the potential to deviate you from the beautiful things in life, the things that you can do with family, friends, have a girlfriend, sex and rock and roll are still pretty good. You don't have to have the drugs to get a good buzz off of that. And hugs are a great buzz. And for grandparents, grandchildren are a great buzz. And guess what? For grandchildren, grandparents are a great buzz too. There's so many beautiful life at the speed of human experiences that we're doing less of because this inherently addictive mechanism called media is taking control of our lives. It doesn't mean there's not a lot of good uses, like a hammer. Know when to use it, know when not to use it. But don't use it for the thrills. Don't use it to be happy. Don't use it to find something you're looking for when what you're looking for is not in these plastic, metal, electronic boxes. It's not the place to go. It's in your backyard. It's in your living room with your family. It's in a group of your friends, even going to the mall, man. I mean, we used to joke about kids going to the mall. How dysfunctional is that? My God, parents would love kids to go to the mall now compared to sticking their heads in their cell phones all day long. Anyway, I could go on forever. I probably stretched your time budget.
No, I was sitting here thinking, Peter, they say that it takes a village to raise a child. And I was just thinking, boy, it's good to know that you're part of the village. You're like me. It's like that. It's really all about what can we do to safeguard the children, and leave that legacy. I mean, what are we doing that makes the future something other than what it could possibly be for some people if they don't know the information that we're trying to impart for them. So, I'm glad you're part of the village and that we've made this connection. I always have one last question that I like to ask. Is there one thing that you would like to that we haven't talked about, or there's just one thing that you'd like to impart to the audience before we part ways? What's that one thing that you want them to leave with today?
Something about life being a journey, and I talked to you about this earlier. We'd all pretty much agree that the past is the most credible proof that there can be a better future. And here comes, come back to this life at the speed of human, life at the speed of technology. That past that we look at, how good it was for our kids, for our families, that was life at the speed of human. And the technologies that overwhelmed our lives are really showing us that there's stuff in the past that's important. There's stuff that Dad and Mom did and Grandpa did that we can't forget. But we may have the last living generations of humans in America, that's grandparents for the most part, that remember a world before technology. And there is absolutely nothing wrong, and it's almost important that they share their memories of that world with their grandchildren and their children, because there is a beauty in that, there's a love in that, and there's just a definitively nurturing aspect of that needs to be shared. We can't let those memories be forgotten.
Peter, you're an exceptional man. I have enjoyed every conversation that we've had, and I've really enjoyed today's conversation. For those of you that like to connect with Peter, you can find him at ahealthyiowa.org, along with a whole host of resources that are available, and he's already volunteered for you to connect with him if you need some librarian assistance. So feel free to reach out to him and make that connection, especially if what we've talked about today has resonated with you, and you might find it beneficial not only in your community that you serve, but maybe with your own family. So thanks again, Peter, for being here. I appreciate it oh so much.
Well, and I'm so happy to be here too. I love the work you do, and keep it up. Anytime you want to come back and create a bunch of content for your podcast, I'd love to join you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this Mid-America PTTC podcast. To learn more about any upcoming trainings, visit pttcnetwork.org and look under your PTTC for the Mid-America link. Remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.